The Cosmic Lunar Soul. Welcome to my channel. If you're new, welcome back to all of my subscribers. So today is actually a topic I've wanted to do for a while, but because of everything that has been going on with Mistress Ray's YouTube video last week, I kind of just decided, all right, I'll bite the bullet and let's talk about it. So today I want to talk about consumerism in TarotTube and just consumerism in general. All right, guys, let's go ahead and get into it. So I have my notes down here. I just want to preface that I will have timestamps, so if you want to skip around, feel free to do that. That way you can skip ahead or kind of revisit a topic. But basically what I want to go over is just my perspective. I want to talk about consumerism in general, and then go into consumerism in TarotTube, and then finally finish up with some tips on how you can save some money when trying to buy tarot decks. So starting off with me, I did find this topic through Night Song Tarot, but it originated from Mistress Ray's video. So I'm going to put all of the links in the description of the different videos that I found and watched, and recommend you guys kind of watch to get involved with the discussion as well. But overall, my perspective, the reason I want to give that is because in Mistress Ray's video, she talks about, her finances and just, her budgetary limitations, stuff like that. I don't want to go as far in depth, but I do want to talk about just my perspective, so you understand where I'm coming from when I'm talking about consumerism, because we're all going to experience consumerism differently. So to start off with, I grew up an only child. I grew up in, I guess, what I would call almost middle class or lower middle class. I'm not sure, based off of the 90s, what I would have fallen into, just based off of how I felt as a kid. But in terms of fiscal responsibility, I didn't really learn that until I was an adult. And I feel like I was really lucky in that sense, that I had coworkers that really sat me down and explained a lot of these things, because we don't talk about this stuff in school, at least in the US. I do want to caveat, I'm in the US, I'm speaking from a very US centric perspective. I do have an understanding of globalism, but I can't speak from that perspective. So I was lucky enough that I had friends and coworkers that sat me down and really just talked to me about budgeting. And really the big turn for me was when I had, I found my group of adult friends who like to travel, and I didn't understand how they were paying for it. I mean, not that I was broke in any kind of means, but I was just like, how do you take so many trips a year, including international trips? It made no sense to me. So I was lucky that I had someone who kind of sat me down and, told me different tips on budgeting and stuff like that, and really helped me get onto the road to budget, so that way I can enjoy the stuff that I want to enjoy. That being said, I work as an engineer, so I do make pretty good money. I don't have children. I do have 2 cats that will probably be around here in a second because they hear me talking. So I have the freedom to spend more or less how I want, when I want. That being said, I am still, to some degree, I'm still very frugal with what I put my money to. It has to be something that I enjoy, but I also have to make sure that I'm saving for things. Like, I just had to drop almost $400 for a vet visit, for example. So, I just wanted to explain that. I do also want to be transparent with the fact that I have recently become an affiliate. So I am the little guy in terms of the size of my channel, but I do still get products for free. So when we get further into the video, that's going to fuel a lot of my perspective on certain things. Going into just consumerism, especially again coming from the US perspective, consumerism is just at an all-time high in general, just across the board. And it has been continuously, as the stress of COVID over the last few years, people are making a lot more impulse purchases. They are, we were trapped in our homes away from people, so we were sort of self-soothing with buying, retail therapy is a term for a reason. So we were going through that phase where things are easy to buy, so we were buying them. So this is happening, right? This isn't something limited to COVID. This is something that's been going on. I would say probably, without being an economist, I would say that this has probably been going on like a very huge increase since the 70s. Corporations realize that they can sell you things. Over the years, they realize that it has become easier and easier to do that. So they are going to take advantage of that. For example, back when my mom was a kid, the only advertisements she might see would be on the radio, would be on the radio, but you can shut that off. Or maybe it would be, driving by stores and shops. You'd see them on the shop fronts, maybe in a newspaper. But usually when you were home, you were home. You're disconnected from the realm of retail. They really closed that gap of your home being an advertising depot when they introduced the concept of like catalogs. Because the whole goal of the catalog was to advertise to you, whereas before radios and even TV and newspapers had other things in them, so you there were other things to distract you from these advertisements. But then once these catalogs came in, you no longer had to physically go to those stores to make those purchases. You could just call them from the house phone. And this really started to introduce the concept of your home now being a place that you are being bombarded with advertisements and a place that you can make purchases from. And that process has only gotten easier and easier as we have gone on. I mean, you can literally browse Facebook, see advertisements, make purchases through Facebook without ever leaving that single app. And now imagine that for every single app that you're on, right? It makes purchasing way easier across the board. And because of that, because spending is just a button away, people are taking advantage of that. Realize that advertisers and advertisements can reach you and affect you much more quickly, and it just fuels this concept of impulse buying. This is something that's going on in general, and the tarot community is not an exception to this rule. Why would anything really be an exception to this rule? So, we were in Mistress Ray's video, she was kind of talking about this concept a little bit, but then also delved into the concept of like indie decks being too expensive and unaccessible. So there's two dynamics that are going on here. So I want to talk about the part that we were kind of just finishing up with consumerism in general, where we were talking about just making all of these purchases and stuff like that. And she mentions how you really don't need more than one deck. And that's true. You don't need more than one deck. I mean, you also don't need 40 pairs of shoes. You also don't need 20 purses. You don't need, you don't need a lot of things. You don't need more than one car. There are things that you need the bare minimum to get through your life successfully, but then there's also the parts of things where you enjoy, right? So while someone might not need 40 pairs of shoes, they might enjoy fashion, and that brings them a little bit of happiness, and they have ways of budgeting for things, and maybe they'll splurge once a year on something, on a really nice shoe, for example, or sneakers. I think that might be more relatable to some people. So while we don't need these things, if you're consciously aware you don't need them, and you realize that you're not in the financial position to incorporate that into your life, then, it's just kind of an unfortunate, it is what it is, part of living in a consumer-esque capitalist society. We can't all have everything, unfortunately. And, tarot is is not an exception to that rule. Um, so so then the other side of things is the indie decks. The indie decks are, if you don't know, they're independently created tarot decks by a specific creator. They're not mass market created by big publishers. So even if a deck was created by a specific creator and what started off as an indie deck, they can sometimes transition into being picked up mass market by these large publishing houses and become mass market. Usually in that transition, certain things change. Sometimes the quality of the card stock, the quality of the box, quality of the guidebook. Certain things will usually change from the indie version to the mass market version. Usually not to any degree that makes the mass market horrible. It just makes it a little more affordable to produce and then therefore sell to people, and makes it more accessible. So this introduces the concept that I think people may or may not understand if you're not in the project management world, is the trifecta. So I'm going to put it up here so you guys can see what I'm talking about. This is the trifecta of, I'll just call it like product creation in general, where you have time, you have quality, and then you have price. You have three. And in the business world, they say you have three, you can choose two. So what that means is, if I want something quick, but I want it to be good quality, then that means it's going to be expensive. You can't get something quick and good quality for an affordable price. So what does that look like, right, in the tarot world? How does that translate? Kickstarters can kind of fall into this category. So if we consider time to be more so less of getting it quickly and think of it more as being the first to get it. So you're the first in line. That means you're going to get it before anyone else. That means other people are going to have to wait longer. So if you want to be in that aspect where you are getting it for time and then you want to get good quality, then it's going to be a little more expensive. The thing about Kickstarter that's a little weird is it varies from creator to creator. There is no set standard. So sometimes you luck up with Kickstarters and you really kind of do hit the trifecta. It's just then time becomes something where you realize, okay, you're going to have to wait longer for this specific deck. But since it doesn't exist anywhere, it's kind of hard to, it's a little nebulous. Cardinal, who I have listed in the description, talks a lot about the Kickstarter realm of things and how sometimes Kickstarters can be a little disingenuous because you'll pay like $80 for a deck and then they'll put it on their website for like $40. I personally never had that happen. I kind of vet a little bit who I'm purchasing from. And that's not to say that it won't happen in the future. I've just been lucky. That's really what I mean. I don't mean to say that Cardinal doesn't do their research or anything like that. I just mean that I've been lucky in this aspect, but I do relate to what she was saying because you are accepting a certain amount of risk doing a Kickstarter. So when you kickstart something, you are usually going to get a few other add-ons. You'll get things that the general public won't get. Sometimes that equates to like extra cards. It can equate to like tarot claws, stuff like that. And then whereas the public either has to buy those separately or they just don't get them. So you're accepting some kind of risk, hoping you get the payoff. And if you're okay with that, then you're okay with that, right? You can't really walk the fence in the terms of Kickstarters. Now that's to be said, of course, there's still good customer service and stuff like that. There's also the flip side where there are certain creators on Kickstarter who still kickstart or pre-order like decks in their indie version, but in the past, their previous decks have been picked up by popular publishers. Whew, say that 10 times fast. I knew one of them was going to show up. This is Luna. So, yeah, that's kind of just my I guess soapbox on how uh how Kickstarters kind of fall into this whole realm of this discussion. Kickstarters are a risk, and they are a financial risk and a time risk. And if you're willing to risk those things, then you might luck out. Like I've lucked out a few times and gotten really great deals because afterwards the price skyrockets because it's now being produced at a slower scale than it was previously. And the reason for that, to explain, a lot of times Kickstarters or any pre-orders, they're taking all of the pre-orders so that way they can qualify for like a bulk print and production, and that makes it cheaper. That's why a lot of Kickstarters are cheaper. It's only cheaper after the fact if they get picked up mass market or if they're being disingenuous with their prices. So, again, risk. Going back to another topic Mistress Ray talks about is about TarotTube transparency. So she was saying how she believes that TarotTubers are obligated to state the prices of their decks. And I would say that I agree with what she's thinking, but realistically, no one's obligated to do anything. And to me, that just equates to a good versus bad TarotTuber. I admit in the past, when I was kind of starting my channel, I was kind of trying, figuring out what I need to give people. But it's one of those things where I couldn't wait for perfection, and I just learned as I went along. And I realized, oh, I should probably mention the price. Oh, eventually I realized, oh, I should mention the publisher because people like specific publishers. Stuff like that. So it's kind of a learn as you grow, especially for smaller TarotTubers. So I don't really hold that against them. But for the larger ones, I will say that, yeah, they probably should be listing their prices. And if they're not, then I probably personally won't enjoy their channel as much because I don't understand, if they're getting something for free or not. And if they're not, then, or if they are rather, how much does it cost? Because to me, if I'm looking at, like, say I'm trying to decide between 3 shirts and they're all the same price, but one has better quality than the other, right? So my joke when I go clothes shopping is like, oh, this is really pretty. And then I see the price. I'm like, it's not that pretty. So, I feel like there's an honesty level in terms of what you're presenting to people. But again, you aren't obligated to do it. But me as a viewer, then that means that I also don't need to recommend you as I don't need to recommend you as a TarotTuber that I like. So yes and no. I definitely get where Mistress Ray was getting at with that. I just don't think we're obligated to do anything. I know we're not. So because of that though, because if you're not being transparent about where you're getting your decks, I feel like that leads to questions about if you're being transparent about whether you like or dislike the decks. But I will say that transparency can be hard to see sometimes. So if, like, for example, I just recently started to be picked up as an affiliate to do reviews or whatever. So most all of my videos prior to like a week ago, or I'll say for people watching this later, you know, early April 2023, they were all decks that I either purchased or I got in subscription boxes, which meant I still purchased them by proxy. Um, so the difference between a review of me purchasing a deck and me receiving a deck is different. And I'm in that stage of discerning how to present that to you. Um, but in the past, I feel like I've always been honest about decks. I've always been, um, at least I would try to be objective. But there are decks that I wanted, I saved for and purchased. So, of course, I'm presenting things that all seem very positive for the most part. And it's going to seem to people who don't watch my channels regularly, it's going to seem like, oh, she only has positive reviews. She's never going to say anything bad. Well, yeah, why would I purchase a deck that I objectively do not like? You know? So when you're talking about transparency, you want to be a little cognizant of that too, because if you know that the person is purchasing the deck, you can probably safely assume that they're not purchasing ugly shit to show to you guys. Like, we're just not going to do that. But there is still a level of transparency in terms of just admitting whether you have gotten something for free, discounted, or it was just your own regular purchase. And I totally agree that people should do a little bit more of that, because it helps paint the picture and the understanding of a deck. Because, Mixture Survey was saying that people can't be objective. And I agree that people will consciously try to be objective, but whether you purchase a deck or it's free, you're never going to be 100% objective. Like I said before, if you're purchasing, you already like the deck. There is no objectivity there. And then if you get it for free, you might subconsciously give a little bit of leeway to decks. One of the things that I realize that I'm going to struggle with is I'm extremely picky when it comes to what the decks that I bring into my collection, and I need to find that balance of being honest about decks that I wouldn't have in my collection because it's just not my aesthetic, versus making it seem like I'm giving it a poor review for the art, because tarot is art, right? So while I enjoy the fact that I am now able to expand the things that I can show you guys, I want to find that level of transparency for you as well. And I suppose I'm being transparent about wanting to be transparent. It's like transparentception. So, yeah, I think give people a little grace in that regard, especially if they are kind of changing and adapting based off of you guys' feedback. People are trying. We're human. We don't do everything perfectly. And YouTube is always about learning as you grow, because you're never going to achieve perfection. So, try to give TarotTubers some grace in that regard. So I mentioned a second ago that tarot is art. So one of the things that Mixture Ray talked about that I vehemently disagree with is buying knockoffs. I think that buying a knockoff is the same as me going into a museum, taking a photo, and then trying to reproduce and sell that artist's work. And that, I mean, to be candid, that is art theft. That, to me, that is art theft. And if you are consciously purchasing a knockoff deck, then you are actively supporting art theft. And to me, that Everybody's morality is different, but that is a hard no to me. That's not someone I want to associate with. That's not someone that I would recommend for other people to watch. And I'm not saying this, please, guys, do not bash Mistress Ray, because we all have our own opinions and levels of morality of things. And at the end of the day, it's not physically hurting people, but it does take away support from those artists. And, you know, art is very subjective. So art is priced in a very subjective way, right? After you go through the how much did the materials cost, how much time did it take to create, the rest of the price is subjective. So you can't really be mad at an artist for wanting to price things a little higher. You can be mad if they misrepresent the materials and the time and effort that went into it. So, for example, she talked a lot about the ritual tarot, that is priced at like 90 something dollars, I think $95. And the artist, of course, can price things wherever they want, but if the quality does not live up to the price, then yeah, that's a little disingenuous, right? You know, that's not cool. If you know that you're using the cheapest materials, if you put like half the time in that other people have put into their decks, then but you're telling people otherwise, then that's definitely an issue. And I think, you know, that's fair to critique those things. Um, it's just not necessarily fair to say in general that indie decks should not be as expensive as they are, because a lot goes into each one. And um and at the end of the day, you're paying for someone's art, which kind of brings me to my last point is, you know, well, actually brings me home back to the first point, is that we don't need tarot to live. We can get one deck and live happily forever if, you know, it will work for what we want it to work for. But if you want to dive into the realm of being a bit of a collector, or maybe not go on full collector, whatever you want to call it yourself, but if you want to create a collection to some degree, then you have to admit that, you know, maybe your collection just will have fewer indie decks, or you will have to find a way to budget, or something like that to get it. I know for me personally, I I am so picky with my tarot decks anyway that it's kind of like a non-issue. It works itself out. I have very much oh, this is pretty, but not for that price pretty mentality. So I don't really have to deal with that. But yeah, guys, let me know what your opinions on purchasing knockoff decks willingly. This is one of the things that online I'm a co-host in a tarot community. This is one of the things that I really like try to educate people on what to look for in terms of knockoffs, stuff like that, because I've run across people that will just openly admit they'd rather buy a knockoff because it's cheaper, and I just it's a trigger. I can't do it. I have too many. I went to art school for middle school and high school. I have too many artist friends. And in my head, it's very personal to me. So it's a very hard topic for me to talk about without just like wanting to throw things at people. But all right. I feel like I rambled a lot about, you know, just TarotTube and, you know, the VR to Mistress Ray. Does VR stand for video reply or video review? Huh. So I talked about some ways that you can save money in the tarot world. Tarot world. Wow, that's hard to say. So keep in mind, cheap / affordable is a different concept to everybody. So in your head, if you have a concept of what is cheap or what is affordable, kind of realize that maybe some options will not fall into that bucket for you. On the flip side, you have to also be realistic that, like I said, we live in the height of consumerism. Everything is expensive right now across the board. So you have to be realistic with what savings you're going to have. And if that's not for you, I do have some free options in this list as well. So, I mentioned before that there are Kickstarters and there are specific indie creators that have historically been picked up mass market. So this requires a little bit of research on the artist, a little bit of research on, the frequency of their stuff being picked up. But if you are in forums and stuff like that, you can always ask about it. You can ask for other people's opinions and you can get a lot of ideas. But if you're willing to wait on a Kickstarter, then you can oftentimes get it cheaper once it's picked up mass market. But the timeline of things for that is Kickstarter, which is usually about, it can be around a year turnaround, 6 months to a year, depending on the creator. Creators that tend to be picked up mass market tend to have a shorter Kickstarter. So the turnaround between kickstarting it and actually getting it in your hand can be about 6 months. So you have 6 months for the Kickstarter, and then it goes into the indie phase where it stays just independently published. And this can vary for an indiscernible amount of time. Sometimes it's frequent, but most of the time it is years. It could be years, especially if you look at from the creation of the start of the Kickstarter, it could be multiple years. So a good example I mentioned before is, you probably saw a review of it on my channel, is the Dreamscape Oracle by Matt Hughes. This deck, so it's this one. I did flip through of it on my channel before. I specifically waited because his two other decks, the Ethereal Visions and the Ethereal Luna Edition, both eventually got picked up. So it was just a matter of playing the waiting game. And as long as you are patient with that, then, you'll be good to go. If you are interested in just common mass market decks, you can wait for publisher sales. Hay House is a big one. If you're in the US, this makes it really awesome because you can just do a huge, just save up a bunch and wait for one of the sales, and you could get a huge haul out of that and then qualify for free shipping sometimes. So if you follow publishers' newsletters, if you follow them on social media, you can keep up with when their sales are. So as long as you're willing to wait for one of their sales, you can definitely get some really good ones. Hay House has sometimes their decks are $8 or $10 US dollars. So if you're willing to wait, then you have that option. You can also buy from secondhand bookstores. My friends have gotten some secondhand decks. You can buy secondhand decks from a few places. Bookstores are probably going to be your cheapest and most effective option in terms of knowing that you are going to be getting a complete deck. You can also go to certain metaphysical stores. Usually, at least the ones near me, usually they are brand new. But there is one that I know of near me that has a used section as well. So that means if you are destashing, you can sell to either a bookstore or the metaphysical store. And that also brings me to the fact that if you follow certain TarotTubers or influencers, sometimes they'll do destash sales and you can get pretty underutilized decks for really cheap. There is that level of risk. You should probably trust who that influencer is and know that they take care of their stuff, and then they also are not gonna sell you a deck with a missing card or something. These are the free options. So one of the common ones, especially if you're really, really new into tarot and you're just looking to kind of go through this learning phase and see if it's for you, this is what I did. You can use the Labyrinthos app. They have it's I love Labyrinthos. If you saw my live stream with Priscilla from A Life Full of Simplicity, we talked about our favorite tarot resources, and we just, oh, I love Labyrinthos. So it's a free app. They have an accompanying website, so you get a lot of details, and you also get to utilize their free digital tarot. Um, and you can customize it. You can include just upright and reversals. You can create your own spreads in there. And then what's really cool, and this is why I liked it, was that it keeps track of the metrics for you. So it keeps track of the cards that you pull, how many of each suit, how many majors, that kind of thing. Um, so if you're really into the metrics behind tarot and you're just kind of getting started and it's a little overwhelming, this is kind of like a one-stop shop. And I think that the way they present the card meanings is really thoughtful. The website also has like blogs and other stuff, and Labyrinthos does sell their own deck too, so sometimes you will get a little bit of that advertisement that we talked about earlier. So just be wary some of that. And then the last option is actually something I recommend a lot of people do as well. You can print your own Rider-Waite-Smith deck. So again, remember, I'm coming from the US perspective. The Rider-Waite-Smith images are not under copyright in the US. I believe they are not in copyright in a lot of places, but again, please do your own research. So to me, printing the Rider-Waite-Smith is just the classic Rider-Waite-Smith. It'll probably be black and white if you can find the printable versions of them. But to me, printing them, because they're in the public domain, kind of opens this up. It doesn't fall under like stealing people's art. Now, if you were trying to go and print like a deck that just came out yesterday, that's a problem. Don't do that. But yeah, printing out the classic Rider-Waite-Smith images, you can print them and then glue them onto index cards or laminate them or put them in sleeves. There's a lot of options that range from free, where you just print them at home, well, free-ish because ink, whatever, to a little bit more pricey, but not like as expensive as a normal deck where you just purchase some index cards. You can go to the dollar store and get them. Or if you want to make it a little nicer and longer lasting, you can get blank cards from Amazon, like blank playing cards. They'll be the wrong size, but it'll work out. So that's kind of like the option in terms of a little more expensive all the way down to free in terms of getting into tarot and getting a deck or making a deck. So let's wrap this up. I've been talking for a while. I've been talking for a long time. Okay. So some of the things that I want to just summarize is that overall, in this world of capitalism and consumerism, we simply cannot have everything. I also want to say it this way as well. We probably should not have everything, and that is going to be more of a personal journey. So while I might want this nice, fancy, $80 deck, should I really? Should I? Like, did I spend a year putting money aside specifically for that deck? Then yeah, fine, go for it. But is it between me eating today or getting this deck? Then that's where you probably might want to consider, should you do this thing? So that requires being honest about the ways that you're spending money, and that can be difficult and is also different for everybody. So give yourself a little grace in that regard, and it's okay to want things, and it's okay to be a little jealous about the things other people get, but it's our own individual journeys where we're always changing and growing, and sometimes some people get opportunities that we never get, or sometimes we get them later, or sometimes we get different opportunities. So just be gracious with yourself and understand that, you know, things will come to you when you least expect them. You just got to be patient. And then I do want to say that I agree that as tarot tubers, and even with myself, I'm always striving for transparency. So I always hope that others are being transparent with me as a consumer of their videos, so that way I understand their perspectives, and people who are watching me understand my perspective. And I'm always striving to be as honest and thoughtful and inclusive as possible. So thank you guys for watching. Let me know your thoughts on this subject. I know it's really deep. I really appreciate you guys watching all the way through. And remember, if you want to catch some of the other videos, I have them linked in the description below. So I will catch you guys in the next one. Bye.